On today's show, Tari Eason unfortunately out 2 to 3 weeks with what they're calling a stress reaction in his leg. Who do the Rockets look to fill those minutes in Tari Eason's absence? Plus, we've got final Rockets roster updates, as well as some important preseason numbers to take a look at ahead of the start of the regular season, and so much more. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
Throw it up to Jalen Green.
Sengun here in the short row. Oh my, that's the no-look.
Jabari for three and the win. Yeah!
Look at Tari Eason.
Here comes Tari.
No!
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
The Houston Rockets select Thompson and Cam Whitmore.
One thing I have never done is not made the playoffs, and so we want to take that step here as well.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day. Shout out to all of our everydayers, whether it's on the way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for making LOR part of your day every single day. A lot to get to in today's episode. Some final updates headed into the regular season for your Houston Rockets. Tari Eason, unfortunately, going to miss the start of the season, going to be out for at least 2 to 3 weeks with what the Rockets are calling a stress reaction in his leg. More on that in just here a second, as well as kind of who we can expect to fill the void in Tari's absence. Final roster updates, including the Rockets waiving Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, as well as locking in a couple new two-way contract guys. We'll get there in just a second. And then some really important preseason numbers that I went digging for that I think really kind of show us who this team will most likely be this season. So let's start with Tari Eason, because this is a big blow for this Rockets team, right? Tari is a big part of what this Rockets team wants to achieve. He is an integral part of their bench lineup, and his absence was sorely missed in those last couple preseason games that he didn't ultimately play in. So first off, I am a little concerned. The whole Tari situation is kind of weird, right? Because he has the collision, the spill, the initial leg contusion, whatever they were calling it at first. They were calling it a leg contusion at first. Lower leg contusion was how they originally listed the injury from the Pacers game. And it looked like he wasn't going to come back in that game. And then he starts the second half in place of Dillon Brooks, and we're all just like, okay, I guess he's okay. I am a little worried that it was a situation where maybe Tari kind of brushed it off. He's like, no, I'm fine. Put me back in. Or maybe the medical staff was like, I guess you're clear to play. I don't know what all went on behind the scenes with that injury and the maintenance behind it, or whether or not they cleared him for, obviously they cleared him for play. But I am a little concerned that maybe that is what kind of triggered the stress reaction in his leg, is him playing not at 100% the rest of that game. So he played not at 100% that game, more than likely, played the Pels game, and then was held out, right? So it's unfortunate that this has happened. And it is a little concerning, the fact that the injury wasn't even diagnosed properly the first time around, the fact that it was called a leg contusion, and then it's being called a stress reaction. So obviously it's something that you have to give him time away from active 5-on-5, and he's got to get back up to 100% before being cleared to medically play. So that's a huge loss for the Houston Rockets to start the season. How do they fill those minutes, though? Who are they going to look to? We kind of already got a glimpse of it at the tail end there of preseason, where they relied heavily on Jeff Green in the rotation. And I cited the fact, in the recap episode for that Rockets Heat game, that the Jeff Green minutes would likely have been played by Tari Eason had he been available. And you could kind of get a glimpse of okay, that was probably more or less Tari's role that Jeff Green was just kind of filling there. And then the backup 5 minutes become Jeff Green or Jock Landale, matchup dependent. And of course, you factor in some Jabari Smith Jr. there. So for the Rockets, I fully expect actually Amin Thompson to get an increase to his minutes. He's already kind of been the high minutes man off the bench. He's been the first guy off the bench for Ime Udoka. And this just gives Amin even more runway here at the beginning part of the season to kind of be utilized in a variety of ways, because there are stretches of the game where he's the primary ball handler, where he's initiating actions for this team. But then there's also chunks of the game where they're utilizing him as a wing, where he's playing a lot of his minutes off ball, where he's used as a cutter, as a screener, as somebody attacking the offensive glass, and as a high-level defender. So I do think with Tari's absence, you can get away with more minutes for Amin Thompson, and it becomes a little bit weirder how you have to maybe stagger some of the guard lineups, but I fully expect Amin Thompson to eat up some of those minutes. Not all of them, mind you, but some of them. And where I think there's a silver lining here is this might be the opening that Cam Whitmore needs to be able to actually carve himself out a spot in the Rockets rotation here early on. It kind of looked like with that final preseason dress rehearsal against the Heat that Reggie Bullock would more or less be kind of that, that low minutes man, give him like 5 minutes in the first half. And if he's got it going, if he hits a couple shots, maybe he gets some extended run in the second half of a game. He kind of looks like more or less like the 9th, 10th man on the roster, as far as just, he gets the, short little burst of minutes in the first half, probably no minutes in the second half in a regular game, where they just ratchet up the minutes for the rest of the rotation there in the second half of the game. But now with Tari out, that's, anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes a night that you're going to be missing out on. I'd imagine you give maybe an extra 5 to 10 minutes to Amin Thompson, ballpark, give or take. Maybe you split some of those other minutes between guys like Jae'Sean Tate, Reggie Bullock, that kind of thing. Maybe we do see a little bit more Jeff Green as the 4 on the floor alongside Jock, Landale, or Alperen Sengun. But my best guess is that Amin Thompson gets an increase to his minutes. Again, you give him an extra 5 or 10 minutes a night. And then also, again, Cam Whitmore, I think, probably steps into the rotation, and he probably takes over those Reggie Bullock minutes, where he'll probably get the least amount of minutes of any of the opening night lineup rotation guys. But I think this gives him an opportunity to kind of carve out a role for himself, to where if he's out playing Reggie Bullock by the time that Tari Eason is back and ready to rejoin the rotation, then that might be his spot permanently, and we might see Reggie Bullock kind of be, pushed towards the back of the bench a little bit. So it'll be interesting to monitor. It's really unfortunate that Tari won't be here to start the season, because, again, he's a big part of what this Rockets team wants to achieve this week. So the silver lining, though, maybe an opening for Cam Whitmore to carve a spot out in the rotation. We'll find out opening night Wednesday on the road against the Orlando Magic. It'll be really exciting to see this team in action for real for the very first time, and then also seeing how Ime Udoka decides to kind of handle lineups and handle situations going forward without Tari Eason for the foreseeable future. Coming up, I want to get into some of the final roster decisions for this Houston Rockets team, and as well as kind of a glance around the league at some of the extensions that are being thrown out and how that might affect the Houston Rockets a little bit further down the pipeline, as well as some preseason stats that I think are really important to get an idea of who this team is going into this season. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Look, you shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event, right? We've all been there. You're on a ticketing app and it's clunky, or it's, it freezes, or you can't find where your seats are going to be. The user interface is super, disjointed. And here's my biggest pet peeve is you punch in all your information, right? You hit submit, and then for some reason, all the information gets wiped out. It's like, do it again. That's the worst feeling ever. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events happening near you. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. They've got all-in prices, and they show you the price up front. You don't get surprised by any hidden fees later on at the end where they tack on a bunch of extra money. It's like, oh, here's the new price. None of that. And you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. It is that simple. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Forgot to mention it in the last segment, but be sure to let me know in the YouTube comments, who do you want to see get the increased extra minutes in the absence of Tari Eason? Be sure to let me know there. And then also, you got to check it out. It's that time of year again. The Locked On Ultimate NBA Season Preview Show is here, a 6-episode series with all 30 of our Locked On NBA team shows. From contenders to tankers, we go in depth to the biggest storylines heading into the season. The Rockets have graduated from the tankers classification into the what's next classification. So that was a lot of fun to be able to do with my group included the Utah Jazz, the Atlanta Hawks, the Chicago Bulls, and the Orlando Magic. So that was a fun group of 5, Rockets included. So go check that out. It's on our channel on YouTube as well as the Locked On NBA channel. But let's get into these final roster updates for your Houston Rockets. So the biggest one, the most major roster update is the actual 15-man roster being trimmed down. They were at 16 the other week. We did a breakdown episode in the aftermath of the Kevin Porter Jr. trade, and ultimately it was going to come down to Boban Marjanovic and Jeremiah Robinson-Earl for that final 15th spot on the Rockets roster. And ultimately the Rockets decided to waive JRE. I'm a little disappointed in that move. Ultimately, Boban is awesome for the vibes, and situationally, you can use him in very niche circumstances on the floor. But Jeremiah Robinson-Earl is a guy who, really young player, showed a lot of promise, obviously recovering from an ankle injury. But I feel like some team out there is going to snatch him up, and the Rockets are going to be really disappointed that they didn't hold on to a 6'8", 6'9", very versatile, switchy big who can, who has a three-point shot, range out to the three-point line, could be used in a 5-out spaced offense. All of this, right? So hopefully it doesn't come back to bite them in the butt, but that is the ultimate decision, or that is the decision that they ultimately went with. So your final 15-man roster, we'll start with the starters. Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr., Alperen Sengun are your starting 5. Off the bench, you've got Amin Thompson, Reggie Bullock, Jae'Sean Tate, Tari Eason, Jock Landale, and then rounding out the final 5 spots on the roster, Aaron Holiday, Jeff Green, Cam Whitmore, Victor Oladipo, who will be inactive. He is basically just salary filler for a trade further down the line, expiring contract, all that good stuff. And then Boban Marjanovic. Those are your 15 Houston Rockets players for this season on standard NBA contracts, but a little bit of movement as far as the two-way slots are concerned. Now, I remember we can go all the way back to Summer League when I took a look at this Rockets Summer League squad and some of the names that played for that team and some of the standout performers, and I was a big proponent of Jermaine Samuels Jr. I thought he did a fantastic job in Summer League. He earned his two-way spot after Summer League, right? So that was one. And then the other 2 names that I highlighted were actually Nate Hinton and Matthew Mayer. Now, Matthew Mayer bit the bullet, unfortunately, and I'm still a little... I don't know if that was the right move. He should be headed down to the RGV Vipers, but for a team that is desperately missing out on some shooting, I would have liked to see them hold on to Matthew Mayer. But the 2 guys who did get the Rockets two-way slots, unfortunately, Darius Days, Trevor Hudgens, sayonara to both of them. But Nate Williams, Nate Williams, and Nate Hinton, UH Coug product, those will be your other two-way slots headed into the season. So the 3 two-way slots for your Houston Rockets: Jermaine Samuels Jr., Nate Williams, Jonathan Williams, and Nate Hinton are your 3 two-way slots for your Houston Rockets. And honestly, much deserved, well earned. And those 3 guys all kind of fit the Ime Udoka, identity of this Houston Rockets team, right? High motor, high energy, defensive level players who can make an impact on the court, who have really kind of shown out in the minutes that they've been given in preseason, as well as, some of these guys dating back to Summer League. So really proud of these guys for kind of carving out their own roster spots, and happy to see them get a role on this team. And look, Darius Days, I think, does have a spot somewhere in the NBA. He's 6'8", he can shoot, he's a versatile forward, got a really good size. Some team is probably going to go pick him up. Trevor Hudgens, Trevor's a really cool dude, and he flashed some solid playmaking, ball handling ability in Summer League, and he can shoot the rock, but he's just a really undersized guard, and it's really hard to find a place in today's NBA as an undersized guard unless you're really elite at what you do. And Trevor's good at what he does. I wouldn't go so far as to say he's elite at what he does. So best wishes to those guys moving forward. But those are your final Rockets roster updates. Now, I do want to take a quick glance around the NBA landscape because we're seeing a lot of the rookie class from 2020, or the NBA draft class from 2020, I should say, not the rookie class, start to get their last-minute rookie-scale contract extensions kicking in. And I do think that by the end of the season, Jalen Green, Alperen, Sengun, they will be up for their rookie-scale extensions. And I don't think it's a given that those two guys, that either of them at this point, are just going to warrant the immediate rookie-scale max extension. Now, hopefully, I would love to be proven wrong if Jalen Green takes a leap this year, if Alperen Sengun takes a leap this year, if they both do. Awesome. If the Rockets have to give rookie-scale maxes to one, if not both of those guys, it means things went gloriously right this season. So I will take that. And I will be happy to be wrong in that regard. But I do think it's worth looking at some of these other contracts that were being given out, rookie scale extensions, to other guys that might be, a decent kind of analog to what we can expect for maybe not necessarily Jalen Green, because again, he's still the number 2 overall pick, incredibly high ceiling, all that. But maybe some of these contracts might be an analog to what we can expect for a deal for Alperen Sengun this upcoming summer, if he's still a part of this Rockets team, if they haven't conducted some crazy midseason trade or something that involves Alp, then I wanted to take a look at these deals. So let's start with Zeke Naji from the Denver Nuggets getting 4 years, $32 million. So about $8 million average annual value. Not an overall bad contract for Zeke Naji, for a backup for the Denver Nuggets. Overall, a really solid deal for him. Then next on the list, we have Deni Avdija. I always struggle saying his last name. With the Washington Wizards, they're starting 3. He's basically moved into the starting rotation, midway through last season. He gets 4 years, $55 million on his rookie scale extension. So an average of $13.75 million per year. Then you get Aaron Nesmith for the Indiana Pacers, who balled out like crazy for the Pacers last season. I'm surprised he didn't get more on this contract, honestly. I thought his was arguably the best deal of all these guys. 3 years, $33 million, so an average annual value of $11 million a year. But I would have expected him to get a little bit more than this on his rookie scale extension. Then you have Josh Green with the Mavericks, 3 years, $41 million. So 3 years, $41 million, coming out to roughly $13.6 million average annual value per year. And then the last one, and this one I think is the most important one for 2 different reasons for the Houston Rockets. So Onyeka Okongwu with the Hawks getting 4 years, $62 million, which is an average annual value of $15.5 million a year. To me, that is a steal for what Okongwu gives you as a big man on the Hawks. I mean, he's your Clint Capella replacement. I mean, he's basically a future All-NBA defensive player every single season. That is an absolute steal of a deal for him, the highest deal of all these different players from the 2020 draft class. And I think that when you look at kind of his impact and what he brings to the team, Sengun is kind of like this, crazy offensive phenom. Okongwu is a really, really high-level defensive player, leaves a little bit to be desired on the offensive end. I think there's maybe some parallels there in like, okay, well, where can Sengun get to defensively this season? And maybe somewhere in that 4 years, $60 million range is a decent analog for what we can expect for a Sengun deal potentially next summer, right? $15 million a year for what Sengun provides to this team seems like a reasonable salary. Again, maybe he far exceeds that this year. Maybe he completely outplays that value and he earns himself a fat payday next summer. And we're talking, 4 years, $80 million or whatever, whatever the max rookie scale extension is ridiculous. But, maybe we're somewhere in that ballpark instead of 4 years, $60 million. But I think it's worth noting. And then the other side note to make on this deal is I think it makes Clint Capella expendable for the Hawks. Clint Capella has been in trade rumors previously for Atlanta, and there was even a period of time over the summer for the Houston Rockets when the Brook Lopez deal kind of fell through and we were wading through free agency trying to figure out what the Rockets might be trying to do. It looked like they were opening up a chunk of cap space to be able to potentially absorb a player from another team. And Clint Capella is one of the names that popped up that immediately I thought of. He's got previous ties to the organization. The Rockets loved him when he was here. And if the Rockets wanted to go a different direction than Alperen Sengun at their 5 spot, they could do a lot worse than Clint Capella. Clint Capella would be a very high upside play as far as just giving the Rockets a different look at the center spot And it could simply be maybe they don't replace Alperen Sengun. Maybe they want to trade for a Clint Capella to have him as a backup off the bench and have kind of this two-headed dragon at the center spot where you've got the more offensively inclined Alperen Sengun and the more defensively inclined, vertical spacing threat in Clint Capella. Who knows? It's just something to keep an eye on for this Houston Rockets team, and it might be a play that we could see them make a little bit later this season at the trade deadline. So wanted to get through some of those numbers for, kind of going around the league and as it relates to maybe the Houston Rockets a little bit further down the line when they ultimately have to pay Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun, because the 2021 draft class extension date is coming up this upcoming offseason. Coming up, do want to get into some really cool stats from NBA preseason, kind of painting the picture of what we can expect out of this Houston Rockets team. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get into the action this NFL and NBA season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place just a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose, and all you have to do is wager $5. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action right now. You can take a look at the NBA odds favorites for this year's title. The Boston Celtics and Milwaukee Bucks tied for first at plus 380. You got the Denver Nuggets and Phoenix Suns tied for second place or third place. How does that work? Whatever. In spots 3 and 4 on the odds list, you've got Denver Nuggets and Phoenix Suns at both plus 550. And then rounding out the top 5, you have the LA Lakers at plus 1,300 to win it all this season. You've got so many other options as well as spreads, player props, over-under, so much more. The app is easy to use. They've got that wide range of betting options. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOnNBA for the NFL season, as well as the NBA season starting right around the corner. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Let's get into some of these preseason stats that I think were pretty interesting. I wanted to dig around the board to just kind of get an idea of where this Houston Rockets team thrived in preseason, where they struggled, and how that's maybe going to paint a little bit of a picture for us going into the regular season. Now, again, I have to lead into this with the caveat of it's preseason stats, but maybe it'll give you just a little bit of an idea of what to expect from this team come the regular season. So first off, the big one, the two biggest ones, I think, first off is they were second in defensive rating throughout the entire preseason, a 95.1 defensive rating. That's incredible. The Rockets really did look like a much improved defensive team throughout preseason, and the important note on top of that is they were the #1 transition defense team throughout the NBA preseason. So the Rockets have been an absolute train wreck of a transition defense team the last couple of years, and Ime Udoka immediately realized that he had to fix that if they wanted any chance at being a halfway decent defensive team this season, and they've seemingly fixed it right out of the gate. So there's still some question marks about their half-court defense, about their rebounding, for sure, but you really like the direction this team is headed just with those two stats alone. Here's a couple other ones that stand out. So 20th in offensive rating. So just a 104.5 offensive rating. So bottom 1/3 of the NBA in offensive rating. And that kind of matches the eye test, right? Their offense was a little clunky, a little disjointed at times, and hopefully that smooths over as the season goes along, as guys like Jalen, Jabari, Sengun start to really come into their own more as offensive weapons for this team. There's going to be some growing pains offensively for sure, and I do think this is going to be a team that has to hang its hat on the defensive side of the basketball, which is going to be a nice breath of fresh air compared to these past couple seasons, where if the Rockets wanted to have a chance in any of these games these last few years, they had to be firing on all cylinders offensively because they were just so abysmal on the defensive side of the ball. So giving yourself a chance to win with defense is always really exciting for me personally. I love defense when it comes to basketball. Now, I will say, just before anybody pushes back on, oh, well, the Rockets were actually 22nd or whatever, because the NBA did exhibition games and you look at these stats on NBA.com, whatever, I already factored out like other teams like Real Madrid or Flamengo or all these other exhibition teams that were playing that for some reason show up in the NBA.com stat tracker. So I did the math for us. Because like the Rockets were technically like 22nd in offensive rating or something, but I'm not counting Real Madrid ahead of them because they're not one of the 30 NBA teams. So I just wanted to clarify that really quick. Really encouraging stat here. 3rd in free throw rate. So free throw rate is a team's ability to get to the free throw line. And that matches the eye test. The Rockets actually got to the free throw line a ton. Now, they weren't great at shooting their free throws, unfortunately, in the preseason. Their free throw percentage, let me get that pulled up here. They wound up being, middle of the pack-ish, 76.3% from the free throw line. That's not bad. You'd like to see that be better, though, for a team that is going to be able to, hopefully this season, get to the free throw line a lot. If that free throw rate is an inclination as to how often this Rockets team will be getting to the charity stripe, then you want to be able to hit a pretty decent majority of them. 76 is decent. I'll take it. I'd like to see that number rise just a little bit higher. They were 9th in turnover percentage. They were 8th in pace, 9th in points in the paint, which is a decent stat, being top 10 in those categories, not half bad. And then we get to some more really good defensive stats that I think kind of show you that this team is really going to be, I won't say a defensive monster this season, but they're going to have a renewed energy on the defensive side for sure. And the more that I looked into these numbers, the more that I think being a top 10 defense is probably going to be attainable for this Rockets team. I think they're going to be a top 10 defense and a bottom 20 offense, or 20 through 30. They're going to be a bottom 10 offense and a top 10 defense. Let me put it that way. And you combine those two things together, and I think that gets you to more or less 500 basketball. You probably drop a few games here and there just because the offense isn't quite up to snuff yet, and that's going to be very dependent on how, again, Jalen Green, Jabari Smith Jr., Alperen, and Sengun kind of progress as the big hitters, the primary weapons for this Houston Rockets team. Because there will be nights where Fred VanVleet can take over offensively, but it's not going to be every single night, right? They're going to have to lean on and have to rely on Jalen, Jabari, and Sengun to do a lot of the offensive heavy lifting for this team throughout the season. So the defensive stats, as they stand out, they were second in opponents' fast break points per game at only 8.6. They were second in opponents' points in the paint at only 39.2. And that's surprising given the fact that Zach Collins and Wemby at times felt like they were bullying the Rockets inside the paint in those two Spurs matchups. They were number 1 in steals per game at 13.2 per game throughout the preseason. And that certainly tracked because the Rockets were forcing turnovers like crazy throughout the preseason. Couple more concerning stats here. So really, again, this is painting the picture of a team that has some really encouraging stats in their favor. Defensively, team-wide, the effort is there, the buy-in is there. I think this team is going to be a top 10 defensive team in the NBA. Now for the bad stuff. Here's the that was the spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down. 22nd in second chance points. So they gave up a lot of second chance points, unfortunately. And 28th in three-point percentage, 26th in three-point attempts. That shooting angle, that shooting one is not going to be great. And actually, let me backtrack for 2 seconds here. I do apologize. I want to clarify. That second chance point stat is actually their ability to score second chance points, not giving up second chance points. That's my mistake. I even put that clarification there on my notes because I didn't want to get those mixed up. Still not great, bottom third in the league in getting second chance points, but that's one of the sacrifices you make when you want to be a good transition defense team, right? That's why last year the Rockets were one of, if not the best offensive rebounding team throughout the season for a good chunk of last year. But they gave up like every transition bucket possible because when you have 2, 3, or even 4 guys all trying to crash the offensive glass, trying to get that extra second attempt, yeah, it works some of the time, and yeah, you're going to get some offensive rebounds, but you're also going to give up a ton of transition points by not being disciplined getting back in transition. So that's, one of the side effects of being a good transition team. You're not going to get as many second chance opportunities offensively. I think that's a perfectly fine trade-off. Back to the three-point shooting. 28th in three-point percentage, not great. 26th in three-point attempts. The Rockets really didn't shoot a lot of threes in preseason. And there was, Ime was even asked about that at one point, do you want to get more threes up? And he said that overall he was happy and fine with the quality of the offense and the quality of the looks that they got. He did speak about the fact that, again, guys like Alperen, Sengun have to be willing to take those looks. Jae'Sean Tate, Amin Thompson, kind of the non-shooters on the team have to be willing to take those shots when presented with them. And what I don't want to have happen for this team is it would be a win for the opposing team every single night if Dillon Brooks, Jae'Sean Tate, Alperen, Sengun, all these non-shooters are the ones taking the volume of threes. And it's actually unfair for me to quantify Dillon Brooks as a non-shooter, right? He's got, solid catch and shoot numbers that back up that stat as long as he's taking good quality 3-point shots. But that's going to be a problem area for this team this season is shooting. And so those numbers kind of support that, and it's going to be something they have to kind of deal with or find solutions to as the season moves along. Maybe Ime moves further away from, outside shooting, and maybe he really hammers in the idea of paint touches and free throws and unlocking that version of this team offensively. But it'll be interesting to see how they kind of navigate this season, because historically teams that don't shoot the ball well kind of struggle in today's NBA. So maybe they're just a really, really good defensive team. Maybe they're like a top 5 defense and they still struggle to shoot the ball and they make up for it because they're a good defensive-minded team. Who knows? But those are just some of the stats that stood out from the NBA preseason that I wanted to share with you guys going into the regular season. But that's going to do it for today's episode. Be on the lookout. We've got a 2-parter, a pair of back-to-back episodes coming out to start to preview the Rockets NBA season, the biggest storylines, the biggest questions, the different expectations for this Rockets team, predictions, and so much more coming up here for our next 2 episodes. So be on the lookout for those in the not so distant future. But as always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.